Today's guest is Michael Burrows, a senior partner with Sheer Velocity, a boutique retainer, executive search firm with an international reach. Michael has spent over 20 years plus recruiting, coaching, integrating senior leaders across industries including healthcare, manufacturing, life sciences, and aerospace. He's widely recognized as a thought leader in executive integration and is the author of Before Onboarding, How to Integrate New Leaders for Quick and Sustained Results, where he focuses on why so many leaders fail and how to prevent it. Before entering executive search, Michael served 29 years as a colonel in U.S. Army, giving him a unique lens on leadership, accountability, and values, especially in today's fast-changing business world. Michael, you spent decades recruiting executives, coaching leaders, and watching people succeed or fail after they hired. From your perspective, what do you think the most organizations get wrong about leadership from the very beginning?
Well, they equate leadership and management as though they're one and the same, and they're not. The words are often used synonymously: leader, manager, and they're not. I mean, management is the prevailing approach to business. People go through MBA programs. Most executives, in organizations at the very top have got a master's in business administration, maybe even a bachelor's degree in some kind of business. That's by far the biggest amount of formal education that gets in business. Well, they don't get leadership training in that business. They get lots and lots of management training. So they come into the organization, they work their way up in organizations where the culture is very management driven and leadership is de-emphasized. Management's a controlling process. They understand that perfectly. You control resources. And the problem, Sanjar, is that they look at people as resources and not as people. Leadership is an influencing process. You influence people, and you do that through communication. Communication is the medium for influencing people. It's not just the words you say, it's your values. It's your how authentic are you? I mean, how do they just know in your presence that you care about them? There's a saying out there that I really like that people don't know how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's no less true in any organization. The worker bees, the people who get things done, want to know that the people who are telling them what to do don't just look at them as a machine with muscles and blood.
Dollar
Yeah.
signs with the
Yeah.
dollar
So
signs, right?
I think that's an issue in organizations is they see those two things synonymously. I spent many years in the Army. I was an Army officer for 29 years. Leadership was something we were taught as cadets and right on through every course I ever attended, right up to the very end of my career. And we all emphasized influencing. That the military was all about that. We taught that, and I taught leadership for 2 years at an Army school for mid-career officers. And the curriculum was basically Army-wide, and it was a leader as a teacher, a counselor, a coach, and a manager. And 3/4 of your job is influencing people, teaching, counseling, coaching. And yeah, a big part of my job, I was a company commander twice. Big part of my job was managing, trust me. But, my real role to get the mission accomplished was influencing people, getting them to do more than they thought they were capable of doing. And you don't order people to do that. You inspire them to do that. And I don't see in the private sector, and I've been a corporate executive 3 times in the Fortune 500, and I've been an executive coach for 20 plus years. I've recruited well over 200 executives to multiple organizations, and I've coached every bit as many. And there's just, leadership is a desert in the private sector. I mean, it's just when you have it, you're lucky. When you don't have it, they don't seem to know how to fix it. And executive coaching, at least the way I do it, is all about leadership. I rarely, Sanjar, go into an organization to do a coaching assignment and have to fix somebody who's an ineffective manager. I mean,
Yeah.
usually they're just so lopsided. I mean, management's an overdone strength, and their deficit is in influencing and leading.
Yeah. You know, You've said leadership is an influence probably several times already in the last few minutes, right? While management is controlling one, why do you think corporate America continues to confuse the two words, right? The confusion between leader and a manager. I mean, what damage does
I
it
think a
cause?
lot of it, Sanjar, is the way we're formed as people, especially people who enter the business world or enter management or want to be a manager. I mean, all
Yeah.
of the formal training they get is management. Like I said earlier, I was an adjunct professor and I taught leadership in an MBA program, and it was the only leadership course, and I taught it, and it was an elective. The MBA graduates didn't even have to take the course. So, if then they enter business and they work their way up, and they're surrounded by people with the same type of formal education, and they just don't emphasize leadership. But you know what, Sandra, and you can vouch for this. We all like to be led. I mean, everybody likes to be led, but none of us like to be managed.
Interesting.
We want to be inspired and motivated, and managers don't motivate anybody. Leaders motivate everybody and
Yeah.
inspire them, and that's why we feel good. The endorphins and dopamine and all that rush comes when we're properly led, because it just affects us emotionally. Our psyche, I think, we on the evolutionary track, we were designed to be inspired, you know, and we were also designed to know when we have to respond to being ordered to do something, you know, the controlling thing. But the natural reaction is to just bristle when they're being ordered to do something. It's just, nobody likes it.
Interesting, right? You also known in the world for your book that you wrote, right? That's one that's behind
Yes.
you before
Yes.
onboarding, right? That's your stamp outside of a lot of amazing achievements that you achieved. You talk about in that book around executive integration in the first 90
Yes.
days. Why is this window so critical, and why do 50% of externally hired executive still fail? Well, literally within 18 months.
Well, I wish I could take credit for the answer that I'm about to give you, but there's a pioneer in this field. His name is Michael Watkins. He's a professor at Harvard, and the first book that ever came out on this topic was called The First 90 Days. And all of his, like a good Harvard business professor would do, he did lots of homework, lots of research, and he's the one that found out that what happens in the first 90 days is what affected these people throughout that 18-month tenure that they had. What they do or what they fail to do in the first 90 days will follow them. And then he also came up with a principle that called the break-even point, that it takes 6.2 months before a new executive is returning value in their organization. Up until then, they're consuming value. Well, who has in this day
Interesting.
and age 6 months to wait for an outside hired senior person?
In a
Yeah,
fast
right.
changing world,
Nobody
that's
has
a lot
time
of
for
time.
that. And yet,
Yeah, it's a lot of
the
time.
problem that they have, and it's the strangest value I've ever run into, is that when senior people, and I recruit these people, when they enter into organizations, at the very top, they may work for the president, or they're always in the top C level or next level down, VP. They think they're ready made, they know what to do. So let's just turn them loose. Look, we went through this rigorous selection process to hire this person, and turn them loose. Let them blossom. Well, that's not a good thing. I don't care what level you come into an organization. Everybody needs some coaching and guidance. Everybody. And so a, a, a practice out there, and has been around for years, called key performance indicators. Everybody KPIs. Everybody in the organization, in a well-run or well-managed organization, has key performance indicators. Well, when you come in, at the higher up you are, the more general those key performance indicators are. Increase revenue by 10% by, second quarter. Okay, all right. That tells you nothing about how to go about doing that. So in the meantime, this new executive's got to come in, and the first thing that has to be determined is, where am I working? Who are these people? What's the culture here? What can I get away with? What can I not get away with? What must I not do under any circumstances? I don't care how big your view is of yourself. All of us ask those questions of ourselves in a new senior position like that. And we all want to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, you highlighting things that doesn't take a month or two to identify and learn and
Now, wait a
embrace?
minute. I would disagree with you on that. I think that
Wow.
you can learn it in a month if you properly integrate it. If you got a
Fine.
process consultant following the principles I put in that book, then you will, within a month, have a very good grasp on that organization. But if left to figure it out on your own, when you're drinking through a fire hose in that organization, everything's coming at you all at once, and you don't know any of the people, and they don't know whether they can trust you. You don't know if you can trust them. Communication, being the medium of leadership, is broken down. If it hadn't broken down, it's never been established because you're new, and they don't know who you are.
What do you think then? Then, if that's the case, I mean, what's one mistake you see new leaders make in the first 30 days that almost guarantee a long-term trouble or fail?
There's several things, but yeah, that's a fair question. I think that probably what I would bubbles up in my mind is that they bring all their successes from their previous jobs into their new jobs. And they think if I just do what I did before, it's all going to work out here. And that's rarely the case. I mean, sure, all the good things that they learn. I mean, take any good lessons you learned along the way and bring them with you. But every new job for an executive is a completely clean slate. You know, you bring that preparation with you, but you better understand what's expected of you in this culture that you're in now, with these people, working with this product or service, and with these customers, and it's a whole new day. I think maybe in a previous conversation you and I had mentioned that one of the problems executives have that I coach, all the time, is many of them think they have arrived. By the time
You see that often, huh? You see
Yeah, I
that
do.
often.
Hey, well, I've arrived. So I don't really need to develop anymore. I got my MBA. I went to a Harvard Advanced Management School for 2 weeks to learn some new skill. Hey, I'm ready made, and I'm saying no, no, you are not. You are well prepared to now learn more. And there's a philosopher that I love, Greek philosopher named Heraclitus. Heraclitus' principle, but this 2,500 years ago, is that everything's in a state of flux. It's always moving, always changing. Nothing is static. And he illustrated that principle with a phrase that's very famous. And he said, you can't put your foot into the same river twice. His principle was that we are always, in his words, becoming. We have never
Interesting.
arrived. And if
Evolving,
you
right?
put your foot
You're
into the
evolving.
river the second time, it's the river's same river, but not the same water. The water coming over your foot's different water. And so if you think that the river is sitting still, and every time you put your foot in it, it's not moving, not changing, not in a state of flux, it's just like the world you operate in, the world you lead in and manage in. It's always changing. You're always changing. If you're not becoming, you're of no use to anybody, really. I mean, I don't think so.
Have you heard of statement, you either growing or you're going
Yeah. Oh yeah.
backwards?
Oh yeah.
What is your thought
Well,
process there?
that's a principle that I've heard in the corporate world. I was an
Mm.
executive in 3 Fortune 500 companies, and you hear that, "Well, if we're not growing, we're dying," and that's a justification for increasing shareholder value, and the second quarter is better than the first quarter and better than that we're always growing profitability, growing product quality, and if you get stagnant and complacent about that, then you've stalled, and if you've stalled, then you're gonna backslide.
Is that
And I think that principle is rock solid, Sanjar, but it also applies to individuals. I mean, if an executive is telling their organization, if we're not growing, we're dying, I would look at that executive and say, are you growing? Are you growing? Are you becoming? Or do you think you've arrived? Because if you're not growing, you're dying. And you may be
and it's evident.
bringing our
Yeah.
company down with you while you're dying. So, yeah, I've heard that phrase quite a bit.
Yeah. Interesting. Kind of let's switch our kind of topic to the generational question, right? I mean, you're in such a unique position where you've observed major shifts in values across several
Yes.
generations, right? Especially around loyalty, accountability, and the purpose. What do younger professionals today misunderstand most about leadership and success?
I would kind of ask you to rephrase that question slightly and say, what do they understand? And I think what
Or I guess, yeah,
they understand,
yeah. What do they
they
understand?
understand a lot. And what they understand is My organization has no loyalty to me whatsoever. And so I am, if my name is Jim Jones, I am the Jim Jones Corporation. I have got to look out for me, and I've got, because nobody else is really looking out for me. They bring me in, they pay me every 2 weeks to do this type of work, and nobody invests in my development. Nobody really cares if business slows down, if I'm going to keep this job. They'd lay me off in a New York minute if they felt like doing it. And they're saying, so why would I have any loyalty to my organization? People my age complain all the time. I don't. They complain about young people your age and younger who just are not, they're just moving all the time. They say, well, I get in here. Life is short. I don't want to
Mm.
waste any time in this organization. They just hired me to do work. And if the senior people are managers who control resources and that's where their values are and leadership is not there, then that's exactly what is communicated down to the people that work for them, who are typical younger people. My father worked for an insurance company
Yeah.
his whole life, and it was his family. And I knew the people as a kid. I knew the people that ran that company. It was a privately held, regional insurance company. He was a staff manager and then a district manager, and he loved these people. The president of that company was like a surrogate father to him,
Such a strange
and you
concept to
couldn't
me.
blast him out
Yeah,
of that company.
yeah.
He loved that
My
company.
gosh.
Now, and then things changed. I remember he was one of the first people I knew to have a company get bought out, sold, and the new people that came in and bought the company had none of those values. And I was a teenager when I witnessed that. And he was like one of the first people I ever knew who went through something. Today it's common. It's very common today. Private equity firms come in and buy up companies. They say, okay, what do we have to do for 5 years and turn this thing around and sell it? How can we gain efficiencies? Well, unfortunately, and I hate to say this because I sound like I'm whining, but labor costs are the thing everybody wants to cut back on. Well, if you treat labor costs like a resource instead of saying people have to lose their jobs in order for us to make our numbers or whatever, then
Yeah,
then
yeah.
no wonder these people in that generation, that gap, kind of look very cynically and skeptically at the business world anymore. While a lot of them want to go out and start their own businesses, you know, and
Yeah, very.
and and they surround themselves by people who are very excited about it, and they all pitch in. We'll work 80-hour weeks. They're not incapable of working and committing. They just don't want to work and commit themselves to organizations and people that aren't committed to them.
Yeah, it's the wild part about it. Those individuals who end up going out and creating their own businesses, those are the ideas that could have been blossomed within the
Right.
corporation that they work for. And those are the next Google of the world, the next Apple of the world, the next Amazon of the world. And obviously, once you get to the top, you kind of all of a sudden become that. You kind of go back to the idea of people are resources again, right? Like the people got you there, and then you turn around and show them that they're not
I
valuable.
think the word I remember back in this was maybe 25 years ago. There was a buzzword going around called entrepreneurship, not entrepreneurship. It
What is
meant
that?
just what you said. There are all these ideas in here. Why can't we harness those ideas in this organization and have these entrepreneurs functioning within our organization?
If they don't feel valuable,
Well,
why
and
would they?
nor are they
If they don't feel
rewarded for that.
important,
It's like, well, we can't. We
that's
have
right.
to have salary comparability in here. We can't give you double your pay because you had this good idea. And they say, well, I can double it out there. So if you're not going to do it here, why should I stick around? It was a great
Yeah,
buzzword, but it never caught on because organizations just rarely do that. Rarely do it.
yeah. Such a valuable lesson for the listeners to hear. If you're an executive or if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, you think how you can disrupt the industry today by simply coming up with a new product or a new idea. You want to separate yourself and be attractable as an employer, do exactly what just Michael covered, right? Just treat people and create that family environment, and don't look at people like a resource, or look at them as real people that are actually can make a
Well,
change.
philosophically, we could do a whole episode just on that. Organizations are publicly traded, and Wall Street requires them to produce more and more every quarter. And you hear this all the time. Well, I'm here to protect shareholder value. That's the top
Absolutely.
person's mantra. Well, I'm here. They hired me to increase shareholder value. Okay, at what expense? At what cost? Do you really think your shareholders, a lot of them like me, I'm a shareholder of a lot of companies. think you ought to just not give a hoot about the people that work for you in the course of giving me shareholder value? Well, that's just a question. There's no answer. That's a rhetorical question. But my point is, I got tired of hearing that I'm just here to protect shareholder and increase shareholder value. I know that. Of course, I mean, we all want that. But at what price? Because if your values aren't also the people, it's not a company I want to work for. Sandra, I will not recruit an executive to go into a company I would not work for myself. That is the first rule when a search assignment comes down and I think, oh, well, what are you looking for? Well, we want a VP of supply chain management or VP of engineering or something. And I say, well, I'm gonna come pay you a visit. I look around, I talk to key people, and I say, would I work here? What's the vibe I'm getting in this place? Because I'm not going to recruit somebody to uproot his or her family and move 500 miles to take a job in a place I wouldn't work for. I mean, that's kind of one of those values I rarely talk about until I get on a podcast where everybody and their brother hears it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the truth, though, right? Let's talk about some of the principles of hard work, right? You mentioned that your favorite clients today are people who are still sponges, not set in their ways, essentially, right? Not letting their ego get in the way. What trait separates leaders who grow from those who stall?
I think that is just a mindset. I think that's programmed into us when we're kids, Sanjar. I really do. I think, the role models we had when we were being formed as young people, that's where those values get instilled, and it carries over into adulthood. There was a professor out in Colorado years ago when I taught leadership in the Army. He had a phrase that what you are is where you were when. It was all about value programming. What you are is where you were when, and the when was ages 1 to 10. How you were value programmed from 1 to 10 carries with you through life. And the only thing he said that would change those values is something he called a significant emotional event. This professor's name was Morris Massey. And that's what'll change your values. Otherwise, you're just going to move through life kind of building your life around the values you learned when you were a kid. And I think that's kind of a big part of the answer to your question is we just carry it on. Next thing you know, you're 43-year-old vice president in a company that basically is a 10-year-old kid with a lot of responsibility and a lot of formal education.
Yeah, yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day by a CEO from company Uber. He was a former CEO at Expedia, and the host asked him, "What's one of the most important value traits that you value in somebody that you want to hire?" He's like, "I just want them to have an incredible work ethic. I think everything else will just be in place, right? If you have an incredible work ethic and you're willing to work hard, just everything else will just be in place
You know what I
eventually
would, if I
because
were
you're."
sitting across the table with that individual, having listened to that conversation, I would say, that's a two-way street. You
I
want
know
all these you
he
want
did
all these
it.
people to have an incredible work ethic. Why? I have that ethic.
That's a
Why
good
should
point.
I give that ethic to you? I could give it to a leader over here who inspires me to do great and go beyond, above and beyond the call of duty, because that's what leadership
It's a
is,
good
to
point.
inspire people to go beyond, to be all they can be. But if all you want to do is to have me have a work ethic, that's just now I'm just a round peg in a round hole. You just want 100 people around here with a strong work ethic. What's in it for them? Now he may come back with a great answer. I'd hope he would. I hope he could say, well, at ease there,
He
Colonel.
did.
Let me
He
tell you the
did.
way we do it at XYZ.
He
But
did.
my
Yeah,
guess
he
is that
did say that.
that's coming down from Mount Olympus. That kind of a phrase is, listen to me, work ethic. Like all these young people don't have a work ethic. And I think that's crap. I know a lot of young people have a very powerful work ethic. They're just not going to
Yeah.
do it for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I feel like I remember read a quote somewhere by Steve Jobs, who passed away, who's the former,
Yeah,
not
he's
Apple. Yeah, Apple. Yeah, Apple. My gosh, I don't know what he said. You know what? You want to find shortcuts. I'm sorry. You want to find some great ideas? Go hire lazy people because lazy people are not lazy. They just know how to find the new ways of doing things better. And I was like, wow, okay, well, that's such a great mindset shift. But it's true, right? I think humans are such a creative being, right? You just gotta give them an environment, like you said, to care, to implement and go above and beyond. And if they feel like they're caring, at least I know if somebody cares about me, I'm gonna go above and beyond. I just know me. I'm not gonna go perform with somebody who just think I should just perform for them and it's a good idea, right? Or I have to. And that's certainly the fact for this new generation, especially with what's available to us at our fingertips, such as social media, technology, right? It's just a different world. You know what? I would love to wrap up with one last question. If you could leave young leaders, young entrepreneurs, or executives, since you work with a lot of them, with one lesson you've earned or you've learned through decades of leadership, failure, and service, what would that be?
I may give you more than one. The first thing I would say is your people will make or break you. That's keep never lose sight of the fact that nothing gets done until your people do it. And they'll make or break you. They'll either do a great job and go the extra mile, or they'll do the minimum amount. And that will be your outcome, how well those people make or break you. And you're going to make yourself better and the organization better if you're leading those people and not just managing them. Don't treat them as resources to be controlled. Treat them as people to be inspired. And if you can inspire people, if you supervise 5 people as a 25-year-old recent college graduate in your first management position, or 25 years later, you're a division president of a $500 billion company, that principle needs to stay with you all the way through. Your people will make or break you. That's and then the one thing I talked earlier about Heraclitus, never stop becoming.
Grow.
Always
grow.
be improving and growing and staying one step ahead of what's coming out there if possible, and that's almost impossible to do, but certainly fight hard to stay on top of growth. And those two things, I think they'll stay with you. If you're always becoming and you know that your people will make or break you and you better lead them and not emphasize management, you're going to do fine.
That's amazing. Well, Michael, I appreciate you so much for this incredible session and words of wisdom that you shared with the world. We beyond appreciative